This is the Ready, Set Podcast. And here's your host, me, Joe Persinger. Ready, Set Podcast. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Joe Persinger, and I'm the most pragmatic and consistent motherfucker you'll ever meet. All right, well, how's everyone's Friday today? I don't know about you, but been having a hell of a time with finding content to watch. I mean, there's plenty out there. It's just one of those paralysis by analysis where there's just so much to do and watch that, I just can't find anything. But I happen to actually stumble on a show that I like. But before we get to that, let's do our usual shit here. We need you to give us a like and a follow on our Ready Set Facebook page. We have a YouTube page. I'd really love everyone to like the podcast and give the podcast channel a follow. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict, CastBox, or wherever you may find your podcasts. All right, I think we know what time it is. Are you ready, Nubs? Are you ready? Set Podcast! All right, so before we jump into this is actually related to it. I just want to preface this whole thing with this question because I think it's really important. So I ask, if a leftist can't agree that a prejudiced person can be flexible with their opinion, and what I mean by that is, let's say there is a prejudiced person, who says, I don't want this race in my house because I think they smell. Now, I've struggled with this for a while because over the years, everyone's told me, well, that's a racist statement. It's not. It's prejudicial. A racist statement, don't know the definition off the top of my head, but I believe the word subhuman are used in there. Or that's what a genuine racist is they think they're above someone and that person is below them, that they're subhuman. But that's not what a prejudiced person is. Prejudiced person might not want that person to be around them, but they don't think they're subhuman. They don't think they're above them. Then they don't think that person is below them. This is why I ask this question. If a leftist can't agree that a prejudiced person can be flexible with their opinion, aren't they just as rigid in their thinking as a racist or a prejudiced person? I mean, I have it wrote down as a racist, but, we're going to be not flexible on that, but we're going to adjust that because, well, no. Actually, I take that back. If you're a leftist and, you have strong views about gender, transphobia, whatever the case may be, that differs from yours, and you can't be flexible in meeting, through compromise, aren't you just as rigid as a racist or, someone that's prejudiced who doesn't want to come off their way of thinking? I'm spending a little bit more time on this than I planned, but I just want this question to kind of permeate over what I'm about to discuss because I think this is an important question to ask. So if one of these subjects is something you're very passionate about and you see someone that has the opposite opinion and you are in the camp where you think it doesn't matter what they think or if they're willing to compromise or even if that opinion they have is flexible in your direction, meaning, they're willing to see it from your point of view or even agree with your ideology if you can present a case for them to, bullying them in it using, Marxist talking points. What I'm saying, if let's say you're someone that is pro-trans and you meet someone that doesn't really think those people should have any, not rights, but let's say they just don't think of them in a high fashion. But as you have a discussion with this person, naturally, if you're really pro-trans and you see someone that isn't, you're going to think they're a piece of shit. What if that person is willing to come off of that opinion, but you're not? Do you know what I'm saying? So if you're someone who is not pro-trans and you're able to kind of meet in the middle somewhat, I mean, not even, or let's scratch that. Let's say you're pro-trans and you're talking to someone that isn't, and the person that isn't is willing to basically come over to your side and say, you know what, I was wrong. Listening to you has shown me a new light, and this is what I think now. What about the inverse of that? Is someone that's pro-trans who isn't willing to even listen to the other side of that coin, doesn't that make them just as rigid as a prejudiced person or a racist? That's all I'm asking. going back to what I was saying originally, there's a lot of shit to watch out there. And, one of the things I happen to not stumble upon, because I actually listened to the podcast called Zach to the Future, is about Zach Morris or Mark Paul Gosselaar watching Saved by the Bell and then them doing this podcast, which is what I listened to. Peacock, which is the NBC streaming network, basically brought back Saved by the Bell. But what they had done, or what they are doing, is creating a reimagination of where the cast would be now. So from what I understand, this isn't canon, meaning, it's not a part of the original Saved by the Bell and the college years. I think Saved by the Bell, the new class, is canon, but this isn't. It's more of a reimagination, and boy, is it. This thing is extremely woke. Like, maybe all TV shows these days are just loaded with wokeness ideology. I used to have a friend that was very Christian, and they used to watch those shows that had like Christian ideology kind of mixed into it. And that's kind of what I feel like I'm watching when I watch some of these shows that have all these woke talking points in it. As far as the original characters, they're all in it except Screech. That's a bit of a spoiler alert, but it's nothing major. I will say, they look a little old, but it's cool kind of seeing these characters revisited. As far as the plot, it flows really nicely. There's a lot of cool Easter eggs and, callbacks to the first Saved by the Bell. But I gotta say, there's a few issues I have, and I have a few questions as well. For those that don't know, it's, back at Bayside. They're kind of... I will say this show is very California-centric. So if you're not into politics, you don't really know what's going on in California, you're going to be really confused. And I feel bad for someone that has never been to America before and watches this show, because they're going to think California represents all of America. It's kind of like when I was a kid, anyone that wasn't from America thought like the Texas cowboy was an accurate representation of America. I just feel bad for those people, and they'll probably never want to come here. Well, maybe they will. It is a pretty cool country. The characters are very interesting. You have, Mac Morris, which is Zach Morris's son. Jesse's Spano, her son is in that main group, and he's just this, like, super sensitive soy boy jock. What else was there? So, yes, he's kind of like, a sensitive A.C. Slater. You have the Zach Morris character, and they kind of poke fun at him in a way of just how just ridiculous the Zach Morris character is in that world. And then the main character is American-born Mexican California girl. The second lead she's a black girl who I think is a little Hispanic too. They're great. They do a great job. I will say that. It's just loaded with so many woke culture talking points. Like, I think the whole the idea of the show is that Zach Morris becomes governor, shuts down all the California public schools that aren't doing good. I assume that would be in LA County. So they bust them out to the rich schools, like Bayside. So you have these two main characters, and there's a third guy too. He's like the mysterious, sensitive guy, whatever. I see what they're trying to do, and it just falls a little flat as far as some of the characters go. But I like what they're doing. So that's kind of the premise. So these three are getting bust out to Bayside, and the one girl who is Hispanic is the main character. She has the main character, so she does the timeout. If you've never seen Saved by the Bell, you probably have no clue what the hell I'm talking about. But she has that Zach Morris role, as in not like what the son is, but, talking to the camera, talking to the audience, And again, they do a good job of it, but it's just, the woke culture is just, it's brutal. It is so brutal. Not one of the main arcs that they talk about is how these kids are just starting off in life better than they are, which is true. I'm not, fighting that fact, but it's just like, you don't need to hammer that home. And I would say even more so, that's not something that you see everywhere. If you go to the middle of Ohio, if you're in like a ritzy, nice suburb, like people aren't rich like that. There are places that have money, but there's less of that than people realize. You go to New York, you're going to go to a county in New York that has a lot of money, just like if you go to Orange County in California, That's a county that has a lot of money. I don't really know. I think they're supposed to be in like the Palisades. I don't think that's Orange County. Maybe it is. Fuck if I know. I don't know California geography. But you get what I'm saying. Chicago, same thing. Where I lived in Chicago, up in Lake County, in the first part of Cook County, those are all very rich suburbs. Those people, they have money. But I will say this. California is the majors. Same as New York. California and New York, there's a lot of money out there in those cities. I mean, you have Hollywood, Wall Street. I mean, Chicago, it has its share of cash. McDonald's, Boeing, some big companies out there, but not like what's going on in New York and LA. Now, however, Chicago is still a cut above everywhere else. There's Miami. My point is to all this is that when you go into these big cities, you tend to have a lot of money. But if you go to a state like Missouri, and you go to St. Louis, I don't think you're going to have a lot of people running around with a lot of money like they do in some of these other cities. So, they kind of talk about this in a way, like this money situation, this class issue, like it's all around a problem in America, which I'm not, again, denying that it's a problem. It is a problem. We live in a class society, or a caste system, if you will. But the way they talk about it, I just find it a horrible misrepresentation. As far as the characters go, I'm not in high school anymore, so I have no idea what's what. Are the jocks soft now? Maybe. Fuck if I know. But this kind of threw me off. So apparently, and they are not shy about this in the first 10 minutes of the episode, they introduce a tranny character.
Ready, Set Podcast.
And there's a little backstory to this. I probably should know this person's name, and I don't. So they wanted to incorporate this, diversity into the cast, and part of it was by putting a trans character into the cast. So in order to do that, they casted someone that's actually trans. This is kind of where they lose me. They offered the role, and on top of the role, they offered this trans actor a producer credit. The original Saved by the Bell cast all have producer credits. This new cast, trans castmate, gets a producer credit on top of that, but also wants ownership of the character. And what I mean by that is, according to her, they offered her the role, and she declined it, which I don't even think I believe that. Because if you're an actor in Hollywood, and you get a role offered to you, unless you're doing movies on a consistent basis, you're not turning shit down. But this is what she claims. He, she,
Ready, Set
it,
Podcast.
whichever.
In care of
So
Joe
I ask,
Persinger.
does it deserve
Ready, Set
that
Podcast.
producing credit?
In care of Joe Persinger.
I don't think so. I mean, are we just going to award people for nothing? It makes no sense to me. You're an actor. Act. Don't make this about more than what it is. And I mean, really, what would be more impressive is if this person was just a girl, just a dude, however it fucking works.
Ready, Set
and then that they had to act that they were trans. I mean, this is like me getting an acting job and then being like, Joe, just act like you. Just do you. There's no talent in that. Because she has a producing credit and she wants to take ownership of the role. I mean, this is just all fancy fucking stupid shit. It's just, it's fluff. It's just making something bigger than what it actually is. Now, this is where I really wanted to get into. Now I'm going to say there's some spoiler alerts coming here. So I hope if you've watched this, I'm not want to tell you to turn this thing off, but just be careful. There's some nothing major. I mean, it's not like there's some huge, plot arc going on here and that I'm spoiling it. Like this, if you were watching the show, you probably knew this was going to happen anyway. So the tranny character ends up making out with the jock character in the last episode. Now what's interesting is that's kind of what they start teasing from the beginning, from the first episode all the way to the end, is that this tranny character had a crush on, this would be Jesse Spano's son. But he ends up hooking up with someone else, I won't say who, just in case. Towards the end, that relationship falters. And then the tranny comes in and swoops in, and they don't hook up, but I guess they start making out. This is where this is where I get extremely confused with all of this stuff. So in the beginning, they acknowledge that this trans character went through her journey. His journey.
Set Podcast. In care of Joe Persinger.
So all the main characters were well aware of what was going on, that this person used to be someone and now there's someone else. So that wasn't really in question. They acknowledge, and they even said they acknowledge and support that this character went through their journey. So here's where my questions come in. is Jesse Spano's son gay? Because he dated a girl prior to this. It was like halfway through the first season. He's dating a girl, and nowhere at all do they address that the straight white, the white character, they don't address his sexuality. And I don't understand that, because the trans character, right out of the gate, they address this person's sexuality. But this person, they don't. So that leaves me scratching my head. So is he gay? Is he straight? Is he a pansexual? Does he?
Care of Joe Persinger.
What? Someone tell me. It's so beyond confusing. The whole world's falling apart here. This brought me to think about it a little bit further as I'm watching these two make out. Like, how does this work? You have based on the information I had leading up to that point, he was a straight white male. He was a jock. He played football. Sure, he was a little sensitive, but nowhere along the lines did they ever even hint or acknowledge that he is or it might be gay or bi or whatever the fuck you call it these days. Because I don't know, the language seems to change on a daily basis.
Ready, Set Podcast, in care of Joe Persinger.
So I ask, if he is a straight white male, again, going by the information they're giving me, he dated a girl in the first half, he's a football player, they don't acknowledge it either way after that, wouldn't this be considered lying if you're the trans person? Okay, well, actually, now, like we said, he was aware, but I'm going away from the Saved by the Bell thing now. So, if you aren't upfront with someone about that, isn't that considered lying? It's different. That's where it becomes confusing. We're spotlighting the sexuality of one character, but not the others? This is just what I was kind of saying before. It's sexist. But if you didn't know the original birth sex hooked up, how is that not considered lying? Or even fraud? Let's remove the Saved by the Bell situation. Clearly, the difference here with that is he was aware of the journey. He was aware of who this person was beforehand. They barely talked about one side, the jock side of it, sexuality-wise. They talk about the transgender person's sexuality through the whole frickin' show. So, obviously, in that situation, I'm just left scratching my head, is this character gay or not? What's going on here? Because they're not explaining it. It's just, they're explaining one side of it, not the other. That's sexist. But let's, again, remove Saved by the Bell from the situation. Let's just say you didn't know this trans character. Let's say, when you were growing up. Let's say you just had met them that year after they had transitioned, and they never bothered to tell you who they were before. And you hooked up with this person, you've made out with this person, you're walking around with them in public, and they don't bother to tell you what was going on prior to them transitioning. How is that not considered lying or even fraud? I mean, if I walk into Popeyes, we'll say, and order their famous fried chicken sandwich, have sex with it, eat it,
Podcast, in care
only
Joe
to discover it's actually a breaded fried turkey breast, I'm going to be mad. Anyone would. So how does this fraud end up not being scrutinized in our society? Is it because of the sensitive subject matter? I've seen this before. There was a person I worked with years ago at California Pizza Kitchen. She actually, oh God, if I remember this correctly, dated like the guitarist in my roommate's band or something like that. I followed her on Facebook on Instagram. Fast forward, like 10 years? Maybe that was like 2005. I want to say it was like 4 years ago or something like that. Following her on Instagram, I believe she got married to a gentleman about 10 years ago, something like that. She was still pretty young. Maybe it was about 8 years ago or so. I through Instagram, just being my voyeuristic self, I would just kind of follow everyone's adventures. Hers would happen to pop up here and there, and her husband were traveling, living in. They were basically Chicago hipsters, going to Nashville, Missouri, wherever. What young urban yuppies do. 4 years ago, all of a sudden, she comes out as a lesbian. Again, nothing wrong with that. Do you, as I say. I'm a libertarian. Don't really care what you do. Just don't fuck with me. That's kind of how I look at it. But the first thing I thought of is like, wait a minute. She's married. How does this work? Did she just wake up one day and think that she was a lesbian and then someone popped up into her life and they're dating? I don't think so. Now, I don't know the specifics of this person's life. I've been watching from a distance. But, perception is a reality. How does this work? Do you come out to your husband and say, I'm gay now and I'm going to start dating chicks, so I need a divorce? I don't get it. And I'll be honest with you. It almost seemed like 1 week they were married and the next week she was a lesbian and she was dating someone. So maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe there's a period of time where there was, hey, fuck off, I'm gay, and then started, but it didn't come off that way. The way it seemed to me was this person basically, got married pretty hastily because they were still in their early 20s when this happened, and then for some reason turned gay, however that
Ready,
works,
Set Podcast.
and then starts
In
dating
care of
someone
Joe
immediately. So that would kind of lead me to believe that this person was probably cheating on her husband with a girl. But for some reason, that's okay. And I don't know why. Because if she was a man, what she did would be condemned. Most people would be like, well, that's fucked up. You cheated on your husband? If that's, and I remember having this conversation with my girlfriend and explaining to her, how is this behavior okay? If this was a dude and he left his wife for another chick, this would be bad. But because the sensitive society we live in, we can't point that out. It's kind of fucked up for you to, leave your husband for a woman. I mean, leave your husband for anyone. You married this person. You said, I'm going to be with you forever. That is what a marriage proposal is. Other than the fact that you're just kind of combining your taxes for, a lower tax rate and all that stuff. But don't get me going on all that. So I was just always left scratching my head over a situation where someone gets married to someone and says, I'm going to be with you forever, and not even 5 years later be like, nope, never mind, I'm a lesbian now and I'm going to start dating this chick. Fuck off, please. So it's just extremely frustrating to see immoral behavior regarded as brave when unsuspecting hetero males or females are baited and switched by trans people. Trannies,
Ready,
if you
Set
ask me.
Podcast. In care of Joe.
It's hypocritical, it's disgusting, and I'd lack sympathy for any tranny that gets caught in this act. And I don't mean lacking sympathy for violence being put upon them. I mean lacking sympathy for anyone who does this and thinks we should feel sorry for them. All right, well, that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for tuning into Ready, Set Podcast. We will be back next Wednesday with a brand new show, and we're at 25 minutes, so I've already wasted enough time of yours this week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, you fucks. Thanks for listening to the Ready, Set Podcast. Check us out next week, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter, and look for us on our YouTube channel. Ready, Set Podcast.